that are in motion to promote employment opportunities for people living. First, I'm thinking about it in terms of what may expand their understanding of what they can make use of and how to effectively make use of existing resources to make change related to employment or self-employment. Also thinking in terms of representatives of who are service providers or are informing the development and evolution of programs to serve people with HIV, for the opportunities to make change in those programs so that they better support us in having the opportunity to improve our economic status. And three, from the perspective of HIV advocates. We have a long road to go to have the changes that are needed to really equip communities of women living with HIV and all people living with HIV to really have anything approaching a level playing field to control our economic destinies and develop our own economic empowerment. I am here representing the National Working Positive Coalition. We are people living with HIV, HIV service providers, educators, researchers, and vocational rehabilitation and workforce development professionals, policymakers, advocates, and employers. We focus on HIV and employment, and were founded in 2003 and have been working for the economic and personal well-being of people living with HIV since then. But I want to say that it's really just in the last several years that those of us working in this field have found significantly more reason to be encouraged about changes that are not yet in place, but resources that are available and changes that are in development that I think are important for everyone to understand. There are three federal state systems that I really hope folks learn a little bit more about in my comments today, because they are tremendously underutilized by people living with HIV. They represent billions of dollars of resources that we have not begun to touch in any way that's approaching proportionality. And I think that they are important for individuals seeking to make change in their own employment status. They're important for any HIV employment initiatives in terms of funding and partnership. And there is also a need for us to become more understanding about these systems, because we have a role to play as advocates to really press them to make the changes needed so that their services and resources become more effective for people living with HIV. There is the potential in all of our communities for cross-sector service coordination strategies that can improve the access to healthy living wage employment opportunities for people living with HIV. And it really does require coordination across service sector boundaries between the HIV services sector, the vocational rehabilitation, the workforce development, and also education institutions. A tremendous milestone in the landscape changing that I have seen came as a result of the National HIV/AIDS Strategy, which did include some very specific employment-related goals. We have significant ground to cover to achieve these goals, but they have put in motion new energy and resources that we can build on as advocates, as service providers, and as individuals seeking to make change in our own lives. Especially positive development most recently has come with Douglas Brooks assuming the role of the director of the White House Office of National AIDS Policy, and I keep hearing reports of how prominently he is putting a spotlight on employment and access to effective employment services for people with HIV among the priorities that he is describing for ONAP. An event coming up is an HIV and employment strategy meeting that he has scheduled for August 13th. That will bring together a number of us from the community together with federal officials across several of the federal agencies and departments that have sit on top of resources that are essential and policies that are essential to the development of a federal employment initiative that really makes change in the prospects economically and in terms of employment for people with HIV. A leader since the National HIV/AIDS Strategy was released has been the U.S. Department of Labor, which is one of the lead agencies at work on the strategy, and the energy and focus has especially come from the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. In the resources that I list at the end of my presentation, you'll see a link to a page that they've created on their website related to employment and HIV, and there's, I think, a good number of helpful resources and information and toolkits and guides that they have developed and placed on that page, and I am both grateful for the work and leadership that they've demonstrated, but continue to see that us as HIV advocates need to continue to call for the availability of the resources and the policy changes in the larger programs and services that really would reach into accessibility for people living with HIV around the country, to have the changes happen that will make employment services effective for populations disproportionately affected by HIV. One of the upcoming projects that I'm most excited about that ODEP at the Department of Labor took the lead in initiating and collaborating on is called the Getting to Work online training curriculum on HIV and employment for HIV service providers, and that's currently in development through an, I think, somewhat unusual cross-agency collaboration with HUD, and it's currently projected to be made available this fall. But I think that it holds the promise of making much more available important information that can make a tremendous change in what HIV service providers understand and may be able to do to help people living with HIV consider and pursue goals for employment. As I mentioned, HUD is a collaborator with the Department of Labor, with ODEP, on that training curriculum, but they've also done some unique taken some unique steps in improving conditions for people living with HIV and making services and resources available. They provided a year of technical assistance to HOPLA providers on how to assist people living with HIV in considering and pursuing employment, and have funded a number of special programs of national significance that have experimented with demonstrating service models that integrate employment supports within housing services. And this feels important to me because for a number of years, as it felt that change was happening very slowly at the federal level, I felt that with the advances in medical care and treatment and the development of a number of important support services, it seemed like the resources made available to us living with HIV could be seen as just leading to circumstances in which we were stabilized in terms of our health and a very basic level of income and housing, and it was almost as if we were provided with our own storage bins in which food was thrown in and meds were thrown in, and then we were left there in what I have seen widely as pretty extreme poverty and struggle to make ends meet across the country, certainly disproportionately among women living with HIV. This next federal agency I want to highlight, I think, holds tremendous promise for people with HIV. At the same time that we have seen that people with HIV in very low numbers are aware of our eligibility for these services and what these services can mean, or have not experienced the success that could be possible in accessing this program. This is the Department of Education, located in the Department of Education. It's the Rehabilitation Services Administration, which oversees the state federal vocational rehabilitation system. This is the state federal system of state VR agencies, vocational rehabilitation agencies in every state, in every territory, and the District of Columbia. They have typically a little bit of a different name in every state. In California, it's the Department of Rehabilitation. In Connecticut, it's the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services. In New York, it's Access VR. These are all state VR agencies funded by the Department of Education through RSA. It's a over $3 billion system that is structured to assist people living with disabilities to gain or maintain employment. And in addition to the really deep services that may be made available for people living with HIV or other disabilities, they fund community, what they call CRPs, community rehabilitation providers, which do and can include HIV service providers who run HIV employment initiatives. So I point this out as a potential source of funding for projects that are currently existing or may be developed to meet the employment needs of people with HIV. Just quickly to mention also NIDR, the National Institute of Disability and Rehabilitation Research under RSA, has also done a number of research studies, funded them, that are specifically focused on exploring questions related to HIV and employment. Legal rights and protections. I think it's most helpful to focus at the federal level on the Department of Justice and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We certainly all need to really know and understand that in this country it is a civil right to live free from discrimination on the basis of HIV status, and HIV is a covered disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we have significant rights and protections related in relation to employment in the workplace and in the job search. And these extend beyond the ADA to the Rehabilitation Act of '73, the Workforce Investment Act, which was just recently reauthorized as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and the FMLA. And I encourage folks to learn about these for your own needs and benefit, as well as to share this information in empowering our communities. The Department of Health and Human Services is where the Ryan White program resides within HRSA at the HIV/AIDS Bureau, and it is a dominating factor in defining HIV services across our country, which so many of us have relied on to save our lives, literally. And from the perspective of economic empowerment and employment, for those of us who advocate around these issues, it's also been, for a long time, a source of some frustration, because the legislation creating the Ryan White program is widely interpreted to disallow any of those dollars going to services that are seen as related to employment. So it's my personal belief that that's been a tremendous contributor to the limited development of employment services and economic empowerment initiatives related to people living with HIV. The Center CDC, also in HHS, created one, at one time, fairly well-funded program called BERT-Alerta, Business Response to AIDS, Labor Response to AIDS. It really focused primarily on education, HIV awareness, and workplace policies that were helpful to people in the workplace, but sadly it was not any resource that extended to helping those of us who were outside of places of employment who sought to gain employment. This past year, one of the most exciting things that happened was the HIV Economic Empowerment Campaign, which was a community-based collaborative advocacy campaign initiated by the HIV Prevention Justice Alliance in collaboration with us, the National Working Positive Coalition, and PWN USA. And in this campaign, we called for a national task force on HIV and employment, and it certainly was tremendously helpful to moving the conversation forward at a quick pace as Douglas Brooks moved into the White House Office of National AIDS Policy. I encourage everyone to go to the website for the campaign at preventionjustice.org/work. Would really appreciate any and all of you as individuals or organizations to sign on in support of this campaign. A recent development also in the policy community is within the Federal AIDS Policy Partnership, FAPP. The decision of the FAPP Housing Work Group to restructure itself to welcome advocates representing employment as well as food and nutrition security in developing a new structural interventions work group. I'm very excited about this and really hope and encourage that a number of you may consider joining us and participating in this effort. Just some quick comments about state-level efforts. First, before I talk about some of the successes, I want to talk about a success that unfortunately went unsupported in Minnesota. I just learned this past week that a wonderful program that was developed in Minnesota that was called Education for Life, that is the only HIV employment initiative that I'm aware of that was developed specifically with a component to address the needs of people living with HIV in rural areas, lost its funding, which was entirely state-level funding from the Minnesota Department of Human Services, and was unable to secure other funding. And despite the fact that it was as popular as ever, in June it had to close its doors. So this, I think, serves for me personally, and hopefully for those of you who are concerned, as a wake-up call that we really do need more organization and energy and resources at the federal level to support the continuation of successful service programs addressing economic empowerment needs of people living with HIV. In New York State, there's been some very good work done. There's a state agency, the Office of Temporary Disability Insurance, has funded an initiative that actually created and sustains 7 HIV employment programs around the state, which I've not heard of being matched in any other state in the country. And it also has resulted in just in June, the development of a New York HIV employment network, which brings together representatives of those 7 HIV employment programs together with 3 others that we've connected with that are HIV specific and are instead funded by our state VR agency. In Connecticut, there's been a long-standing community-based effort to expand access to employment opportunities for people living with HIV that has really happened as a result of the leadership of an agency that had been known as the Connecticut AIDS Resource Coalition and through a merger became AIDS Connecticut. They first presented and hosted a statewide HIV and employment conference in 2005, and just this past year, the 5th of those statewide conferences was presented, which uniquely brings together people living with HIV, HIV service providers, and leaders and direct line staff representing their state vocational rehabilitation agency as well as their workforce development system. And among the outgrowths of that ongoing energy and focus was this past year a statewide HIV and employment resource guide created for HIV-positive residents of Connecticut. Quickly mention the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which was just signed into law by President Obama on July 22nd. This was the first reauthorization in 10 years of what had been known as the Workforce Investment Act, and this law is being described as a redesign of the U.S. system of job training programs, and it represents billions and billions of dollars of resources targeted to assist Americans related to employment. And I think we should keep our eyes on it. It is mandated that these resources work effectively for people with disabilities, which includes people living with HIV, and for any HIV employment initiatives, it represents a potential source of future funding. Just skipping, I'm running out of time. I just want to mention the system of American Job Centers and the Workforce Investment Boards. This is the national system of workforce development resources flowing out of the Department of Labor in D.C. The American Job Centers are also known as one-stops and are in almost every community and are intended to be effective for employment. About half of the states currently have a program that's called the Disability Employment Initiative located within these American Job Centers, and they can be a uniquely valuable resource for employment for people living with HIV, and I encourage folks to find those programs in your communities and work to activate them to be effective for people living with HIV and as partners with our HIV service providers. The Workforce Investment Boards are the regional bodies that decide where those federal dollars get allocated. So if you currently run an HIV employment initiative or are exploring doing so, that's a place to go to get access to funding for those programs. And so if you look up your local workforce investment board, you will find out who is currently providing services related to employment in your community, who may be good partners and collaborators, but also how you can be online and informed about potential future funding opportunities. Social Security Administration has two programs I'll quickly mention. You should know about the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Program. It's WIPA. This is a resource for folks to get individual or group training and consulting on what happens when you go to work, when you're receiving SSI and or SSDI. This information is so tremendously difficult for all of us to understand, and it is very individual. And the WIPA program is located in almost every community and is a resource that can help train us as service providers and is available to us as individuals who need to understand what happens to my financial benefits if I go to work, what happens to my health insurance, how can I make plans that really take care of me. And I strongly urge that we all learn more about this program because I think benefit specialists are in far too short supply in all of our communities to allow us to make well-informed decisions related to employment and change in our economic status. Social Security Administration also runs the Ticket to Work program. This is a huge program that was developed with the intention of it expanding the resources and options available to people living with disabilities related to needs for employment services. And in many communities it functions effectively that way, and it can also serve as a source of funding for programs including HIV employment initiatives, and it also does fund VR agencies and American Job Centers. Last agency and category of services I want to mention is this SBA related to self-employment and micro-enterprise development, which for some of us is actually the best option in terms of change in our economic status. And so I strongly encourage anyone interested in considering and starting a small business that you learn about all of the resources available locally and regionally from the Small Business Administration. And then here are additional resources and my contact information at the end of these slides. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions or requests for further information. I think I've gone over. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Nana.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Really a lot of information there, and I'm sure folks have, even more questions. I do want to remind everyone that we will have opportunity for Q&A and discussion at the end, but do feel free to write in some of your questions along the way in the chat box so we can make sure we respond to them. And then also the recording and the slides from this webinar will be available afterwards as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Heather Salick from Working Choices at Cascade AIDS Project, and she'll introduce her co-presenter as well. Heather, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Nana, and thank you everyone else for being present for this phone call. I'm here with Tasha Schill. She's one of our really successful program participants, and she's really been making a lot of strides towards policy and advocacy, as well as working on a lot of her own personal goals. And she's got some time at the end of our presentation to tell you a bit more about where she's coming from and where she's going, because she is going on up. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you a bit about what we're doing over here in Portland, Oregon. And so basically, I manage Working Choices, which is our employment program, which is helping people who are interested in returning to work have the supports they need to navigate that process. Or if somebody's kind of exploring careers after a period of transition, maybe interested in volunteering or looking at education, we just figure out where people are at, where they want to go, and help them come up with a plan to get there. So basically, I manage the program. I have support with a program assistant named Katie Burtis, and she's full-time. And we also have a half-time staff embedded from our Oregon Employment Department named Michelle Teeters. And kind of going back to what Mark was mentioning earlier about just having those community supports and collaborating with the cross-sector service coordination. This is, I think, our program's been a really good example of that. All right. So we want to make sure that we're giving participants the tools and supports they have to be a more competitive job seeker and help them land the job they're looking for. Also helping people navigate along the way any challenges that may come up. We find that we've met a lot of people who maybe they learned about their HIV status at their previous employment, and then as a result they lost their jobs, whether it was because they needed to focus on themselves, or maybe it's an unfortunate situation where they might have shared their status with a coworker and then felt like their position was eliminated shortly thereafter. So we've also built into our program, if people need any kind of legal supports or advice, again, collaborating with community partners who are doing it well. I'll talk a bit more about some of those partnerships later on, but making sure that we're hearing what the needs are and we're evolving to keep meeting the needs, whatever they may be. Our program is currently funded through a HOPWA SPINS grant, that's Special Project of National Significance. And what's great about this grant that's funding our program is it offers a lot of flexibility around supporting our participants' housing needs. For example, we can help out with moving costs, housing applications, and mortgage payments provided that the person isn't in default. Unfortunately, the grant is non-renewable, and it's going to expire in in December of 2014. That's this year. But also, we've had the knowledge this funding's running out, and I've been working very closely with our development team here at CAP to secure additional funds to keep our program going. And as of now, we are set and secure into the next year and forward. And then I also want to mention that a lot of support that I received in initiating and getting the program rolling again was I was fortunate enough to participate in the Getting to Work Technical Assistance Project. And it was really wonderful to have a year of support to meet other organizations who are doing the same things we are, maybe have done it and been established, and we can learn from them, but also connecting with larger federal level type of supports, and just having access to a national arena to really hear about what's going on. So with that, some of the program supports that we're able to offer is individual meetings and then a variety of workshops. We like to take an individualized and comprehensive approach to helping people living with HIV and AIDS meet their vocational goals. And we also have access to a lot of different resources to address a variety of needs. And again, if it's something that we haven't learned about yet or we don't have access to as it comes up, we need to learn more as part of the continuous improvement process, and it helps add another piece to a lot of what we can offer. As you see on the screen here, some of what we offer. Open Lab is our drop-in self-directed job search help. We're fortunate that on our first floor of our building, we're able to share space with Pivot, which is another program of Cascade AIDS Project that's focused towards a lot of prevention and outreach. But during the day or morning on Mondays, it's unoccupied, so we've been able to move in there. We've got a small computer lab, and staff are available. We've got a couple volunteers. Whatever you need, if you just happen to be, coming through downtown and you just need to print off some more copies of your resumes, we're right there for you for a check-in. Or other people show up at 10 and they work 4 hours straight through and able to kind of bounce ideas off of staff and volunteers there. So just having a real supportive, comfortable, low-barrier environment. We also offer orientations to new participants. We do them once a month. You don't have to wait till orientation to select in or to start participating, but we just offer that a more formal setting to talk to people about all of the catalog of things that we can provide. We do a job club weekly, just peer networking and support. We alternate between curriculum around job search, challenges people are experiencing, trying to strategize solutions. And we also have partnered with some local organizations and recruiters and have them come in and talk a bit about their hiring process and give people a chance to really have a face-to-face connection with somebody who's responsible for hiring. For example, we get the city of Portland to come out at least once a quarter or at least 3 times a year because, as some people know, have experienced applying for work with a government organization is much different than applying for work with a public entity. So they can come in and talk a bit about how that process looks, walk people through that and answer questions and talk about nuances around applying with the city. We offer a career exploration workshop, too, to help people determine what they want to do if they're in a space where they're not quite sure or they can't go back to the work they have been doing. We talk about knowledge, skills, and abilities, what they've liked and not liked about their past jobs, and what works and what won't work. And we do a lot of individual appointments on an as-needed basis, and individual appointments could be everything from, I got an interview on Thursday, can I just come in real quick and get some support and some help, all the way to, I've got a significant challenge and I want to lay this out to you. Sometimes, not to operate in a silo and recognizing that there's a lot of different parts to make somebody whole. Sometimes it's hard to focus on employment if your housing's in crisis, if you've got some challenges at home, you've got family issues, your health is having a challenge. So we like to collaborate as much as possible with other team members, case managers, people from the medical clinic, wherever that team may be. We like to make sure that we're connecting and we're hearing everything somebody's saying, and we're also making sure that we're helping them get the supports they need. If we can't provide it, make sure we make that connection and introduction. Let's see. Also, too, we have a blog that we post our latest job openings on for people to hook into. When I first started here, I did a weekly newsletter, and what I've learned is the newsletter grew tremendously, not just people who wanted to receive it, but people who would send me information about new jobs. And I was sending the newsletter out once a week, but if I get a job, like a few days earlier, sometimes a few days earlier is some lead time that people could use to apply for work. So we created this blog, and a few people have access to log in and post as we get jobs. We just put them right up there, and everyone we meet, we're like, here's the blog, and check in. Whenever you were looking for work, it's there. The latest and the greatest is available. So maybe I'm really motivated, and I'm up at like 11 p.m., and that's when I'm looking for work and really writing cover letters and feeling inspired. Well, you've got the latest information right there. And then also, too, you'll notice to the right, we've got a Twitter account, and we like to post open positions there, as well as we've got a couple local hashtags for Portland that I'm able to pick up on and retweet some of those opportunities that aren't really presented elsewhere. Let's see, and to be eligible for working choices, it's really low barrier. Someone has to be unemployed, underemployed, dissatisfied with their current situation, and have to be a current client of Cascade AIDS Project. And again, if somebody isn't, we help facilitate that connection. And through the process, too, what other supports do you need that we can get you hooked into? All right. So another one of our strengths is that we are part of the Aligned Partner Program here in Portland, and that's kind of going back again to the cross-sector service coordination. we have a formal partnership with WorkSource Oregon. That's the Oregon Employment Department. And through this partnership, our participants could access additional training, certifications, skill upgrades, or other things that will help make them more competitive or keep them current. On-the-job training opportunities, which are great. They have to be over 30 hours. Sometimes they're closer to 40 hours. They have to include health insurance and have to pay competitive wage. Those are the requirements for the on-the-job training opportunities. They also have paid internship opportunities, and these are also really great for some of our participants in that these paid internship opportunities are time limited to 240 hours, but the participant can line that up any way they want. So example I love to give is I worked with this guy named John for a while who was coming back to the workforce after a period of not working. And he felt like he wanted to work but wasn't quite sure how that would feel. He was afraid he'd get into a job and he would have to quit or get fired because he couldn't perform. So this was a great solution for him, able to get him started at 10 hours a week, 2 5-hour shifts, and talk with him a lot closely in the beginning about how is it feeling on the commute to work, how is it feeling at work, sitting in front of the computer for more than 2 hours, just checking those things out. And then as time went on, he's like, I'm feeling pretty good and I've adjusted to this. I like to bump it up to 15 hours a week. So he was able to finish out his internship at 15 hours a week, had a much more clear understanding of where his stamina and endurance was, had something that was real current to put on his resume, and got paid for it. And then there's additional case management support that's also provided through this Aligned Partner Program. And again, just being forward-thinking and collaborative, what do people need? How can we access that? And if we don't have that, how can we possibly make that happen? And so some of the additional supports too that are available. This isn't the end of the list, but this is definitely a lot of what we can help people with. If people need computer help, sometimes, you can Facebook and you can Google stuff, but actually getting into the nuances is preparing a cover letter and fumbling with the formatting features on Microsoft Word might be a little frustrating. So we can help people take a workshop so that they can feel more comfortable and confident about what they're doing. GED and GED. We have a wonderful partnership with Portland Community College, and they've got an adult basic education program which helps people get their skills to where they feel confident and comfortable, but also has them in a college and learning environment, which gives them access to a lot of the other things that are there, as well as understanding career pathways and how certificate programs or an associate's degree might be a vehicle to really help lift somebody up and out into the next level of what they're capable of. And as you see, it's a huge list. There's definitely a lot of support that we provide, and a lot of that's made possible through having partnerships in the community. Because without those partnerships, we wouldn't nearly be as effective as we are. So Goodwill Job Connections have been a rising force in our area that seems like they're offering a lot of similar services to the Oregon Employment Department. They establish a lot of relationships with employers, and they have Meet the Employer events, small groups of job seekers that can really connect one-on-one with employers. What we like about working through Goodwill Job Connection is we can make referrals for work without accidentally disclosing status. So in Working Choices, we don't do a lot of job development because if I introduce myself as Heather with Cascade AIDS Project and somebody right behind that, I could be accidentally disclosing status. So we try to find very creative ways around that, including using a doing business as name when we're trying to get information or help facilitate somebody connecting. We work closely with our local vocational rehabilitation offices, and we're trying to strategize a way that we could work with them more closely. We see a lot of people who have come as refugees from Africa and other places, and work closely with IRCO, our local community, Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. City of Portland, Disability Rights Oregon for advocacy, any kind of legal challenges. We also have Basic Rights Oregon, like right across the street. So, and just meeting your neighbors and what do we do when we're in social services and how can we continue to help each other. And then the more other programs and people in the community know about us, we're helping to dispel stigma. We're helping to spread the word about the services we provide. We're spreading information about prevention and education, and it just makes the community as a whole better. So talking a bit about our participation data. So in the past year, we've had 125 participants come through our program. 10 of those individuals, 8%, identified as women. This number has increased by 1% from the previous year, and we have an ongoing goal to make sure that we're increasing participation by women and communities of color. And this kind of representation is pretty much proportionate of our overall population that's accessing all kinds of services from Cascade AIDS Project. And we're continually striving to make sure that we're reaching more people and trying to make sure that we look at those goals on a regular basis to keep improving them. And so with women in general, we can provide a lot of different support that's specific to women. One of the things that we have done for some women is providing childcare during job search and interviews, and whether it's just staff or collaborating with our Kids Connection program or having some volunteers, making sure that we provide that support so they can do what they need to do. Interview clothing, if you need something for an interview, referrals to other groups, or if you get a job and you need to access a different type of child care, we can make sure that we get that covered. So I'm going to turn it over to Tasha so she can tell you a bit about her story now. Here she is.
So, hi, I'm Natasha. I'm a client of Cascade AIDS Project, and I've been a participant in the Working Choices program. And they've done a lot for me. When I first came back to Cascade AIDS Project to access services, I was new in recovery. I've been dealing with addiction for a long time, but now I've got like over 2 years clean, so I'm actually oriented and focused. But they were able to help me through their individual meetings, both Heather and Katie, and helped me learn how to goal set so that I can figure out what I wanted to do and address my barriers so that I was able to be successful in reaching my goals. And that's actually been really, really helpful because now I am very, very goal-oriented because of the meetings I've had with both Heather and Katie. And through coming in and accessing the services on Mondays at the Open Lab, I was able to actually get hooked up with WorkSource and do their paid internship. So I actually now have current work history, and that was really well because I ended up working with another nonprofit here in Portland, and so I was able to help mentally disabled young adults and help them skill set and learn how to access services in their area. And then since then, I have become a mentor at Transition Projects, and they work with the homeless population in Portland, Oregon, and I help them find housing and get connected to services. And also, through Working Choices, I found out about a volunteer position here within Cascade AIDS Project in their Client Service Center, and I do the same thing there that I do at Transition Projects, which is I help the HIV-positive population find housing and get connected to services. And which is really exciting for me because I like to give back. And also, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. Through the goal setting and the internship, I was able to begin college. And with the help of Katie, I've become even more organized so that I'm able to maintain, right now I have a 3.88 GPA. I'm a lot.
That's awesome.
So I have a 3.88 GPA, and also I have a job interview at Transition Projects for a job that pays like $13.25 an hour, and that is this afternoon, which is really exciting. And so that I've met with Katie this week and met with Heather this week, corresponded with Katie via email to do mock interviews so that I can answer the questions appropriately for the type of environment that Transition Projects is. And I don't know, I'm really appreciative for everything they've done. They've helped me refocus myself and reach goals, which is pretty amazing because 2 years ago I was an unfocused mess. So I think that's my little testimony there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tasha. And Tasha's also been giving some presentations, and she's very interested in advocacy and decriminalizing HIV and a lot of other things. She's been active in our local Women of Wisdom group, and she provides a lot of peer support to others who are trying to figure out where to go, and she's a rock And I'm really glad Tasha could be here today. I asked her last minute, and she's a real champ. So with that, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather and Natasha. And Tasha, good luck on your interview this afternoon. I know we'll all be sending you some good vibes. That was really, really powerful and inspiring to hear. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our final presenter for today, Stephanie Laster, who is with Sister Love Incorporated. And Stephanie, can you just sound check so I can make sure we can hear you while I'm loading your presentation?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're. Can you talk one more time? I think. Are you on a computer mic?
No, I'm not. I'm on my phone. Okay, maybe
yeah.
I am on the computer mic. Let me get it better.
We can actually hear you fine. I think it's okay. I'll let you know if there are any problems. So Stephanie Laster, another really inspirational woman. You know, as a woman living with HIV myself, I would just say that it's always so exciting to hear these stories from Tasha and hear about the important work that organizations are doing to advance employment rights of women living with HIV. And I'm just really thrilled that we have Stephanie with us today.
Can you hear me now, Nana?
Yeah, we can hear you. So today to bring it home in terms of talking about how women living with HIV can work together with each other and support each other to enhance our own financial security. We know that sometimes women have to work outside of the typical economy in order to survive. Sometimes we have to survive in a parallel economy in order to avoid those income restrictions that I talked about at the very beginning of this webinar. So we might not be able to have income on the books above a certain level, but we can find other ways to support ourselves. And there are some really innovative models, and some of that is what Stephanie's going to talk about today. So Stephanie, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Laster with Sister Love, and I just want to tell you a little bit about me. I've been positive for over 17 years now, and I am one of those women that has gone through each one of these steps everyone has talked about today. I can remember being in that position of just not knowing what I wanted to do, and someone was there to give me a little guidance, and I want to share some of that with you all. Next slide. So one of the things I find is that when you help a woman rebuild her self-worth after she gets that HIV diagnosis, it's often one of the most important things you can do. Because sometimes when we get that diagnosis, we are beat down and tend to think that, you know, we did something wrong and why did this happen to me, and oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do that. So doing my outreach efforts, I've noticed that sometimes when I find women in those positions and you possibly invite them to something going on in the community, like a workshop or a forum or something like that, and even show them how to go somewhere and you know, get something to put on to wear, you change their attitude, and it helps them to feel better about themselves, which in turn can help them to do better. And I think that is so important for all of us. Next. Now, one of the things I enjoy doing is teaching a woman how to take something she likes to do and something she does well and turn it into income for herself. As we know, a lot of us like to cook, and if that's something you like to do and you're home during the day, then you can cook a nice meal, take it up to the mechanic shops and sell lunches. A lot of those guys would love to have a hot lunch versus going to McDonald's. And I'm not talking about something I've heard. I'm talking about something I've experienced and something that I know works well. And the same thing goes with if you like to crochet, if you like to do jewelry, whatever it is, something that you like doing. If you like to read or if you like writing, you can help people with their schoolwork. And people pay for these things. And sometimes, it's sad, but we have to do that to enhance our incomes because of the way our governmental system is set up. A lot of times, if you're receiving your benefits, you don't want to take a chance and mess up your medical benefits or most of the time, even your financial benefits. Yet and still, we need something to go along with it to be able to live the lifestyle that we want to live. Because I don't want somebody outside of me dictating how I live my life on a daily basis or limiting me to what I can do. Can I have the next slide, please? I often think about policies and how could we get some policies to include help for women that want to help other women. How can we get basic seed money, not necessarily to help a woman get her business started, but basically seed money that can help us help another woman, whether it's provide the materials she needs to fix the lunches, to sell the dinners to the people, or whether it's supplying the jewelry kits so that she can make jewelry and sell jewelry. Sometimes if we can get the government to understand that if we just had a little help, we can help someone else, then we can make life different for a lot of people. Policies such as these can make a significant difference in how a woman feels about herself. Sometimes all it takes is a little encouragement. If you encourage somebody and make them believe in themselves, then that makes a significant difference for a lot of women. Can we have the next slide, please? Common Threads aims to help and support women. We help them understand the impact of trauma in their lives and how it may have impacted their vulnerability to getting HIV, as well as other life conditions such as economic security. We also, in our group sessions, we create opportunities for individuals and collective entrepreneurship. We buy their first jewelry startup kit. We support women by developing marketing opportunities to sell their jewelry, i.e. the Made It Ourselves marketplace that we're planning to do at the United States Conference on AIDS coming up this year, 2014. We had one last year in New Orleans. If any of us were out there that attended, we saw a group of women selling their wares, and we're planning to do the same thing this year in San Diego. This is an opportunity to help women that basically live on disability believe in themselves that they can do it. It changed the mindset of women to believe that where they used to think attending a conference would be out of reach for them. Now we let them see this is an attainable goal, something you can do to make yourself, to build up your self-worth. Can we have the next slide, please? I can remember about a year ago, a woman came into a workshop I was facilitating, and this woman, she did not even want to share her name. After the workshop, I spoke with her and invited her back for a one-on-one the next day. As we talked that day, I showed her how to make a bracelet and saw a smile come on her face. Through conversation, I found out that this woman had been positive for over 20 years, and she'd never attended a support group. She had held on to that secret and being isolated for all those years to the point that she didn't even want to share her name when her doctor sent her to that workshop. And just that little time that I spent with her that day made such a significant difference in her life. she said, "This is something that I can do." Today, she is making outstanding jewelry and inviting me to local vending opportunities. She's inviting me to come and see her setup and these are things she's reached out and found on her for herself. She's actually shopping and buying herself new clothes, things she said that she hadn't done for many years. And that makes me feel good, but it also makes me know the importance of what it is we need to do to encourage our sisters and help them know that even though you might live on SSI or SSDI, you don't have to limit yourself to that monthly income. There are things that we can do to get ourselves into a better position. Sometimes, volunteering might just be that first thing to get you out of the house. I know for me, it worked just like that. I needed to do something to get out of the house and get out of that woe it's me. And I started to volunteer. And I hooked up with the agency and basically was pretty much there every time she asked me. And one day she said, if you want a job, you can so have one. And I explained to her that I didn't believe I could work because of my disability. And she said, let's try it and see. And then I was able to find out that as long as, I stayed within a certain income, then I could work. But at that time, just getting that taste of being in that limited income space made me want more. And then I had to find ways and means to be able to accomplish and have more without disrupting my medical benefits. So those are opportunities, but they happen on a individual basis. And so we have to do things, we have to go and do our individual footwork to find out how we can make that happen for ourselves. Can we have the next slide? I just wanted to share with you, this is my contact information, and I am at Sister Love, and you can, if you have any questions on how maybe I might do it and work every day and still get my medical benefits, you can feel free to call me, or if you have any other questions, you can reach out through the Positive Women Network or Common Threads and find out anything it is that I want to share. Hopefully, I was able to share something that could help us get to the next level.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was really, really powerful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and also what you've seen in terms of working with women. And I think the connections you do if folks can mute their lines, there's some background noise. The connections that you drew between, trauma, healing, rights, dignity, health, agency, I think were really very revealing and powerful, and thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and have people, I'm going to put us into Q&A mode so that people can unmute themselves if they want to. This does mean if anybody's called in through a computer mic, there might be some background noise. So if folks are on a computer mic, please try to mute your mic. Computer mics often have feedback on them. So I'm going to put us in Q&A mode. If people have questions, they can write them in the chat box, or you can also press *6.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So we do have time for questions or comments if anybody has any. It's just *6 to unmute your line. Give folks a minute to unmute.
Can we ask questions if we're just on our phone and not at that little box on the computer?
Yes, exactly. And please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Okay. Are we ready?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Susan Mull. Hi, everyone. So great to hear everyone and see 34 people. Just a question, maybe for almost all four of you, but Mark and Heather, I think, would know this, and great to hear from you, Stephanie and Natasha. As we all transition through things that we've done, our jobs and our education kind of things, I think, Mark, I wanted to ask you, is there anyone in any of those agencies compiling information, like from universities, like, for example, Edison University in New Jersey, that takes life experience and sits a person down and says, what kind of crises have you gone through? What kind of public speaking have you done? What kind of political activism have you done? And it turns out with that particular university, you can actually get college credits to make it further, not make it seem so daunting to change what you want to do in life or to become something different. Are any of these agencies compiling different kinds of universities like that that are taking life experience and putting that into college credit?
Great question.
Great question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can, Mark. Great. I feel like I'm with you. We sat at the same table with, at AIDS Watch. And I'm Susan from Pennsylvania. Yeah.
So great to connect, and I really appreciate that question. And it feels very personal for me because at the age of 50, I decided to finally do what I'd been talking about for many, many years, and that was go back to college to finish up my bachelor's degree, which I had abandoned when I was 20. And I went to a school here in New York called Empire State College, which is a special school within the State University of New York that I was recommended to because they did have that unique structure where you had the ability to gain college credits toward completing your bachelor's degree from and related to your life experience. So I was able to write about my life experience and get significant credit towards getting my bachelor's degree. So I was able to finish in 1 year of coursework together with writing these essays that were pretty simple.
Fabulous.
Which I think is a fabulous model. I would love to learn more about where other schools are that do that, but I feel like it's increasing. But I think that's such a great idea and really deserving of more research, and that would be great information. I would love for us to actually have that project of compiling information about where that can be done, because I think a lot of us at some point beyond our earliest college years would really benefit from feeling encouraged about trying to complete those milestones.
I think so, too. I think we could look into that. Could I just say one more thing? And then, because I know there's other people there. I want to encourage, and I'm trying to do this too, I'm nominating a young woman, and I might nominate a couple more because August the 8th, which is next week, is our deadline to nominate POS 100 under 30 women. So, Natasha, I don't know if you're under 30, but you can even nominate yourself, girlfriend.
Hey, this is Heather. Unfortunately, Natasha had to leave because she's got to prepare for her job interview. But you know what? I want to nominate her, and I'd like to connect with you offline to get more information about how I can do that.
Great, Heather, that would be great. And I can even check, give you information there at Cascade AIDS Project, and it's really easy. POS 100 under 30, and it's so important to nominate our amazing young women that are just going through college, grad school, doing all these changes, really leading the way. The young are speaking. It's just incredible. So we need to nominate more, and Positive Women's Network has just incredible women, and so many of you know so many.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your great questions and comments and ideas. Anybody else?
You're welcome.
Again, star 6 to unmute your line. I do see that we have a comment here in the chat box, and I don't know if any of the presenters want to respond to it, but I'll just read it out here. It says, I think one of the greatest fears, obviously, that keeps PAWS people from progressing forward is simply not being able to open up and share about their status. Clearly not just simply broadcasting their personal information, but being selective about who they disclose with and to. Personally, I find empowerment and hopefully feel that I have saved somebody from a diagnosis simply by my disclosure. Equally, after being a long-term survivor of 28 years, I've learned much on interacting with people, knowledgeable or otherwise. I don't know if any of our presenters want to speak to that from their own experiences. I know that a lot of you were talking about, either kind of directly or indirectly about the relationship between healing and how and working, and how do you think disclosure might sort of play into this? Stephanie, it seemed like your story, the story that you shared about the woman you met who hadn't disclosed anything for 20 years, might
Yes.
have a bit of light. I was wondering if you might want to speak to that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to unmute at the time, because can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes. That woman that I talked about, now she is disclosing. She's still not maybe where someone else thinks she should be, but for herself, just speaking it out is a great step for her, and she's able to be in places where other people can actually question whether or not she might be positive. So I think disclosure and your self-worth plays a significant role together. They intertwine each other, because when we hold that secret and keep it, it keeps us from being flourishing to the best of our ability, because we're concerned on who might find out or who might even ask the question. And you'll find out that once you get out in the workforce or just the volunteer world, you don't always have to disclose your status right away. You can work, and as time goes on, you're going to feel comfortable and you're going to want to disclose it. It's just going to come naturally. But you don't have to start off by doing that, and you don't have to beat yourself up. But I bet if you get started, you'll see that desire will want to come for you to do that.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Heather and Mark, I wonder if you have any experience from your perspectives in terms of how disclosure can impact a person entering the workforce in employment situations, either, past disclosure or disclosure of HIV status, with respect to sort of employment rights and protections. Is there anything you can share in terms of your experience advocating for people in transitioning back to work or actually helping them transition back to work, in terms of how to maintain confidentiality if they may not want to be disclosed or anything like that?
So
I do have some thoughts. Yes, please, Heather.
Thank you, Mark. So here at Cascade AIDS Project, I have access to an incredible resource in person. Some of you may have heard of him, Benjamin Garrett. He's our Prevention with Positives coordinator, and he comes to job club actions and rights. He talks about if you should disclose, helps people navigate that on their own, and he tells his own story of disclosure at his previous workplace. And we meet people too that have been fired from positions or experienced a lot of discrimination and microaggressions after maybe sharing their status with somebody, and similarly that's left them very scared to be open about their status. So we just try to meet people where they're at and try to respect their comfort and privacy as much as possible, but then also to having them hook into other resources and connect with people that have more of a peer perspective on here's a bit of what I've done, and here's how I've managed that over time.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to add?
Yes, I completely agree. I think that disclosure related to employment has to be understood as a very individual choice and decision. I think everyone, first of all, needs to understand that in almost every case, people do not have to disclose. Some people don't understand that they don't need to disclose and there's no reason to disclose. The one legal reason why someone would ever need to disclose is if they needed to and wished to request a reasonable accommodation as covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And in the case of activating your rights and protections under the ADA, you would need to disclose that you have a disability, but at least some people, if not many people, could be able to even activate that protection and that resource without disclosing that they are living with HIV. I think that there's a tremendously empowering dynamic when people are able to disclose, but I don't think everyone does have, as we hear, an equally positive experience in the workplace, and I think it's well worth careful consideration based on what the individual's feelings are and the individual workplace that they're in. But I think for many people it's important to understand that it's not necessary to disclose, but also there are strategies to consider disclosure as potentially a way to get support that you need and want to be able to work. I do feel like the complexities around disclosure and employment is one of the reasons why I think there needs to be effective access to knowledgeable expertise and employment services for people with HIV, nationally and in communities. Complicated.
Thanks so much, Mark. I think we have time for maybe one more question, if there is one more.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. What?
Hello.
Oh. If you're trying to ask a question, we can't hear it. But I do see a few little things coming in on the chat box here. Disclosure, resources.
Hello.
There's a little background noise, so if you just unmuted your phone, if you could just remute yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
What?
Okay, let me go ahead and mute it.
All attendees are muted.
Great. So I think the presenters are still unmuted, and we're right about at time. So what I'm going to do is ask our presenters if they have any closing comments they want to make, either reflecting on what they saw in the chat box or what they heard today from each other and from all of you. And then we will go ahead and close out. And just, as we're doing that, I want to say that it's really been, this is such an important issue, and I think we've had a little bit of an opportunity to touch on the many complexities of it, but clearly there are so many different factors that play into this issue of economics, employment, ranging from health and well-being and dignity to rights to economic security and stable housing, and also trauma history and the role of employment as a piece of our healing, and the complexities around disclosure related to that. And I think that this is definitely a subject that can be explored much further, and I think our presenters did a really fantastic job of helping to frame it today. So I'm going to ask our presenters to make their final comments, and then I'll just give you a couple of quick announcements, and the resources for each of the organizations that presented today are up on the screen for your reference. Mark, do you want to start off?
I think I would just say that I want to salute everyone on this call for having participated, hopefully learning information that can be useful to you individually. I'm tremendously appreciative of you learning more information about all of these concepts and resources for how you can share the information across our community and how we can better work together as advocates to press for the resources and programs that we need. Especially loved hearing Stephanie describe Common Threads, which I think is really important as an example of a project that goes outside of the traditional expectations of what people should and can do vocationally and really defines success by what's best for individuals. And we have to insist on that in all employment initiatives that get developed. Thank you.
I'd also like to thank everybody for the opportunity to present and to talk to you all. And please feel free to reach out and send me an email or give me a call if you have any questions. And I also really appreciated hearing the presentations from Stephanie and Mark, and it's really empowering. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Heather.
And thank you for the opportunity to present. And I know I got a lot out of the conference, and I hope that everybody else did too.
Great. Well, again, a huge thank you to our presenters for their wealth of knowledge, expertise, and information, and to all of you for being so engaged in this discussion today. This is part of a webinar series that we do. So the last one we did was on advocating for women-centered care. This one was on advancing employment opportunities. Forthcoming, you'll see a couple of announcements about one about advocacy for addressing HIV, violence against women, and trauma, and another one on looking at biomedical prevention and opportunities to expand and uphold sexual and reproductive health and rights. So keep an eye out on our website, which is at the bottom of this slide here, pwn-usa.org. We will be uploading these slides and the recording for your reference. Those should be up hopefully at the end of the week, but if not, early next week on our website as well. And once again, just an enormous thanks to our fabulous presenters today, Mark, Heather, Tasha, and Stephanie. And let's all remember, even though Tasha's not here with us right now, to send her good vibes this afternoon for her interview.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.